we see wa and now we see wa abra and now Finland or Namaba Musumenya Bibi Mawaka abra National Middle Movie Bia Waba. I mean, Abra for winning Henna, what I was. Adicha, that's it.
Jumadia Yasino Abra oba hima nana ekua okuta otoso miensa anso ebepia sebi na ono nso so de nsem bi atudwa efa nanigi a age ne ye ne de se mpuntu hima edi dwumadi eti se ababe tudwa esanse ebeboa ama abra edin akwachi na eba ne sanso a na Ghana nyina ene befa ne ntuma pa efra
se yareka yabaka de busum bi awa baseno ko ena ye wa ha na wo ma Yanehen award. The Mujumay so on Yadam Kutin Yerizi will baby bebre. On Yadame Legacy Award in quotation in Puntima Oregon. Or your scholarship training as a man, no crow, or your bebuna, or womb. To master there, my father Marconia do. No, Mamma Biana Swati. I say, when young farmer where university, one where training college, and nursing college, one where SHS. I think SHS and count so on a new cronty or the SHS abacount. And now 101 San Juma, no what soon no watch row. Na scholarship training nana there. And some of Azama abro chrono, with 2 years, 2 years, I'm a burner sooner said. Scholarship Jumezino Osha Sa Yetum ya Buana Abroko Wafanin Tampa Efra. Timazama Samuberry, Yabeda Obi Biasi na say Yako Yoko to Jane won't pay Yanke and him Nana Kojo a day and na nimping. Mayen free abra na yemfa yeni enhyem wo government accountability series eye dwumedie bia omampani John Dramani Mahama ababe sha ase ewo naban mu na ode hwese aban mu mpanimfo a yede dwumedie soronko ahye omonsa no abrani abrebia no obabe ka che Ghanafo dwuma omudi ne bebia omudi omudwuma no ekọ eno na enedie a yeyeye no omampani anase aban kasamafo eye honorable Felix Kwache Ofosu ono enedi mu akotene na obeyi nsem a ewo nsentwefo adwen so obeyi na obeyi ano eche Ghanafo nyina nsem a oka no ebi efa 1 Ghana cedi levia mrebi etwam yede to fiwa mu se ne ebeya yebehwe ama nyina nkane a ye yusi awa Ghana ha se no ebekoso na esipi se ne ebeya lighthouse no ebeyi efi ho osanso ekasafa journalists Mreka kra etwemu wobeti na obi akobu journalist aka asem bi ama omanfo etu agunu so bambo dwumayefo bi atu omonsa agunu so e de ensa akeka no no na entwe yie ewo oman mu no osanso eyi nsem bi ano efa sa niye no ho na sese ameno kase no yebekọ ne yakwakweti nsem a okan ni bi ne yeba yebetwa so
and it brings back the question of what happens to or what has happened so far in regards to the police officer who assaulted my colleague Banahene during the Ablekumanov rerun. Does it just end at interdiction and nothing happens? Because we at EIB Network, we are still seeking answers from the police. What happens to the police officer who assaulted our colleague? Thank you.
Okay, so I will answer that right away before I take the next question. The bit about the 1 cedi levy. I think that the 1 cedi levy and its relevance and importance was thoroughly explained by the Minister for Finance and Minister for Energy when the bill to have it passed was introduced in Parliament. The whole idea was to ensure that expensive liquid fuels that were purchased for the purposes of firing thermal plants, but whose cost had not been factored into the tariff buildup was addressed, because it was becoming a bit of a problem. The estimates show that on a yearly basis, about $1.2 billion or so is required for purposes of importing liquid fuels to fire thermal plants. Now, if some effort was not made to bridge this gap, it was going to pose a challenge, even as efforts were made to address the many problems that plagued the sector, which we inherited. In terms of the exact amount of money that has been collected, I'm not able to provide the figures now, but I don't think that it's anything that we cannot get in short order. So I'm sure that in the coming days that should be. I suspect that even the Finance Ministry in its yearly report to Parliament on petroleum revenue receipts and the general accounting that is done for the budget for each year will shed light on how much has been collected. But what is clear is that it certainly has been put to good use and has contributed significantly to achieving stability in the power sector. When we took over power, there were challenges with electricity stability. And I think all of us can attest now that for several months now, electricity supply has been stable, and we've not experienced the outages that many had feared would be the case. In terms of the clearance of the energy sector debt, I think on Monday, the Finance Ministry issued a statement to inform Ghanaians that up to about $1.4 billion of debt owed in the energy sector had been cleared. I don't think that the statement suggested by any stretch of the imagination that $1.4 billion was all the debt that had been cleared. The statement broke down payments to IPPs and other stakeholders. There's a table that indicates how much has gone to who. So any thorough reading of the statement will make it clear that the Minister for Finance or government was not saying that all of the debt had been cleared, but a significant chunk of the debt had been cleared within a matter of a year. And this has brought significant relief to the players in the sector. What had happened was that there was some lack of discipline in terms of adherence to the cash waterfall mechanism, which was designed to ensure that all players in the sector get some form of liquidity to finance their operations. And for
Omanfo bekaya efimra John Omanpeni John Dramani Mahama eba abenmu oye na adwin say deputies ministries bebeba na ewo ho no any ministers bebeba na ye form no obebo modern ateso aba form abebeju 23 ni deputies ni nyina nso obeye fi ho allowances bia na nka ye de ma abenmu mpanyinfo a na odwin say entwe yie no obeyi ni nyina afi ho when na ye nhehye bia oye se ne ye beya sika nka ye de betua saa edwumayefo nyina aka no ebeba beye sika ebeba begu timamufo ebotom na ye nso ye ho ahare eno ena nsentwere bi ebisa se ene na efi se ye share saa nhehye ase no sika sen ena aban enya na edien ena odiyeye osanso eyi nsembi ano efa chips compounder ekoye campaign message a Omanpeni John Dramani Mahama edema Ghana fo binom eno nso akosisen mwaya odema no ebini.
You indicated that government had saved an amount of 400 million cedis out of, or as a result of expenditure cuts at the presidency and restructuring and all of that. It's been 1 year in office. I want to find out from you specific figures, how much you've been able to save as a result of this restructuring in the fiscal year. Secondly, in June last year too, you indicated that government was going to construct at about 600 chip compounds. And I ask you directly because you made the comment or you made a promise. I want to find out from you if these 600 chip compounds you said were going to be constructed at the end of 2025 has been constructed, and when are they going to be operational? My third question has got to do with petitions that have been submitted to the presidency. We know that the last petition that you received, at least from what we were aware of, was a petition on against the EC and then the OSP. We want to find out the status of these petitions and where has it gotten to.
All right, thank you very much, Agosia. On the savings that have been made, arising out of the cost-saving measures that President Mahama has introduced, I'm not sure that I put a specific figure on it. I don't recall ever putting a specific figure. What I can say for certain is that significant savings have been made, and it's not difficult to see why this is so. So, for instance, let's use 2 reference points. There was a time when we had 125 ministers or so under the Akufo-Addo administration. Currently, we have 58. It should have been 60, but for the unfortunate tragedy that occurred on August 6th. Now, even if you pegged the figure of 60, and you did an analysis of what it would require to keep 125 people at posts as ministers and deputy ministers, that alone is significant. Let me give you practical examples. So, every minister of state, indeed, if I show you my appointment letter, you will see that there are things that you are entitled to enable you to do your work. One of them is a 4-wheel drive, a Land Cruiser. You are also entitled to a saloon car. These are duty post vehicles. They are not vehicles that are gifted to you. You use them as and when. But often it is the case that a new one is procured, because invariably by the time that a new government comes, what exists may not be roadworthy or may not have the capacity to perform at the high level that is expected. So often a new one will be procured. You are also entitled to accommodation, and that means that existing government bungalows would have to be refurbished for you to move in. If you are not given a bungalow, then you are given 20% of your basic salary as rent allowance every month, and it is at market rates. In addition to that, if you check my appointment letter, you see that you are entitled to fuel, a certain amount of fuel every week. And then there's a salary that you take, which these days is consolidated to include other perks and emoluments. And then in the days that ex gratia held sway, you will be paid ex gratia, which is 4 months out of every year that you serve in office. Now, the price of one Land Cruiser at current market rate, a standard Land Cruiser that a government official of the rank of a minister or deputy minister must use, is about $120,000, and I'm sure you all know it. There are some that are more expensive, but I think the standard one is $120,000. A saloon car of the sort that the minister or deputy minister would use is about $50,000 to $60,000, depending on the brand that is purchased for you. Now, if at a point there were 125 ministers, and now there are 60 or even 50, let's say 60, just for purpose of analysis, it means that you are avoiding purchasing 65 Land Cruisers at a unit cost of $120,000. You are not going to buy 65 saloon cars at a cost of between $50,000 to $60,000. You are not going to have to spend money refurbishing 65 bungalows or paying, in lieu of that, 20% of basic salaries of 65 people as rent allowance every month. You don't have to pay fuel, and you know how much it costs to fill a Land Cruiser in a saloon car. So you don't have to pay that, and then you don't have to pay salaries of those people. You don't have to bear their travel costs and other things that they are entitled to. And then when they finish their service, you don't have to pay ex gratia to 65 people. When you put that together, you are talking of tens of millions of Ghana cedis, and that is just for ministers alone. When you come to the presidency, in addition to the 125 ministers that we had under President Akufo-Addo at some point, there was a time when they had up to 361 staff. And I'm not talking presidential staffers. The staff of the office of the president, that is the political staff, are grouped into 2 or 3. There are presidential staffers. I heard somebody say that presidential staffers acted as deputy ministers. No, they are not. In terms of entitlements, they are equivalent to ministers, presidential staffers. So when you hear somebody referred to as a presidential staffer, in terms of entitlements, they don't function as ministers, but in terms of what they earn and their package that goes with their office, they are equivalent to ministers. Presidential aides are equivalent to deputy ministers in terms of their service conditions. And then there are political staff who are staff of these staffers and presidential. For instance, if you go to the president's office, there's the president himself, there is the chief of staff, there's a secretary to the president, there's a legal counsel, and then there are other senior advisors. These advisors don't work alone. They also have staff that they work with. So if you put all of that together, there was a point that we had about 361 under President Akufo-Addo. I think about 41 staffers or so, who by virtue of that position would be entitled to the conditions of service of ministers and deputy ministers. So the 125 Land Cruisers would come with another 40 Land Cruisers and 40 saloon cars, 40 bungalows or 40 sets of payments of what do you call it, rent allowance, 40 sets of payment of fuel for every week, and then all the other conditions that they are attached. So you do not really need a soothsayer to tell you how colossal the cost to government was to have that number of people. The fact and reality now is that we have fewer people in government now than we did under the previous administration. So significant savings have been made. That cannot be disputed. That must be placed on record. The second bit is about the chiefs compound. Now, it is not my policy. I spoke about it, announced it, but it is government policy. What it is that Akosia, this year, and indeed if you followed the budget for 2026 carefully, you find that government intends to begin the implementation of the free primary health care policy, which was a cardinal policy proposal in our health section of our manifesto. It is something that President Ama himself spoke to on many occasions. Now, primary health care, the medical experts will tell you, often takes place in lower level health facilities. And when we talk of primary health care, we are talking about basic minor diseases, headaches, stomach aches, and non-serious ailments which require attention. Now, currently, the arrangement is such that referral facilities like district hospitals, regional hospitals, tertiary hospitals, and what have you are burdened with many of these illnesses. So normally it should be a CHIPS compound, a health center, or at most a polyclinic that handles these kinds of ailments. Now, government's policy is that going forward, starting from this year, there should be some segregation. And indeed, if you check the budget, about 1.5 billion Ghana cedis has been earmarked for that, so that these minor ailments are treated at a lower level. Now, the most basic building block in the health sector is a CHIPS compound, which ensures that this level of care is administered. There are many places in Ghana that do not have it. And I come from Abra Sebu Kwamankese, so I know. There are 265 communities, but we have less than 30 CHIPS compounds. So you see the kind of pressure that is brought to bear on the referral facility at Abu Dungwa, or the health centers that are dotted around Abakrampa and Muri. So to address this gap, government decided that the Business Assemblies Common Fund, the disbursement of it should come with guidelines, because, mind you, the president has also said that up to 80% of all monies accruing to the Business Assemblies Common Fund should go to the Business Assemblies, which is a departure from the arrangements under the NPP where disbursements were made at the center and left very little for the districts. In order that the disbursement of those funds align with government's overarching objectives like free primary health care and what have you, guidelines were sent. And in those guidelines, every assembly was directed to construct a minimum of 2 CHIPS compounds. There are 261 district assemblies. So that alone gives you in excess of 520.
Maminka was a Kaseboy a Chogu Ewo Coastal TV digital channel 514 Oko Facebook any YouTube swan ube huye wo Coastal TV Cape Coast na onye ache Kaseboy fe yetwa Kasebono eso Ojumayani bia ese na katua na se obi ya ade ma na se eso weni a eye se obebbo na baso na abasobode ne obetimi bia wo se wo hwe na odemma no ye ko Ghana Police akache eho na IGP ene nimpenfo IGP owura Christian Tete Yohunu ene nimpenfo abomoden a ene amene wo kasei police for do so 17 omado omo ho adi se omoye police for mapa meche police for omabri omumujeni aye adwuma ese na fata assignment bi eni ho ayede ma omo a omani so timeline bi eni ho ayede ma omo a omani so chese police adwuma emu kukuhwe ase nyina emu no omabomodin adanso ewo police adwuma ni mankasa kasa chese omudwumedie eso eni sa nipa dunso ya meka omo ho asemi sese ameno kasei mpanyifo abomodin apeje omudibrem ama omudibra eso ewo police adwuma ni mu na chese dwubia ameka enso se na midin kankan no amakwa adwuma kese pa na omoyeye enti na police mpanyifo ehweye na omode sa dibre kese no ede ema omo
we nyina eyesane ebeya police edwuma no yebehye mukina ewo Ghana ha sei na bambo akoyie ewo oman mu na police edwuma no nso enya edin papa ewo Ghana ha sei na IGP ne nimpanyinfo ebo modern share police for aka incline say omonhwe na omonso ensua se na ebeya police edwuma no ebekoyie na se obi abo modern saa ni dibre enka wasada mbebo modern ama abaso bodie bia esefata omono omode ebema omo IGP ne nimpanyinfo esanso ehye police adwumayefo incline say se na ebeya bambo hunsem ebekoyie ewo Ghana hanti no ebeya anka obia mo ne homodin dibe bia ye de ahya wonse bia no bomodin se obeye na waye niye na obeye ede ama oman Ghana nyina esanse oman no se koyi a woka ho bi na me nso meka ho bi police fo abusuafo ka ho bi obia ka ho bi na oman no se koyi a ye nyina ye bedide entimpanyifo edunso ya sesei unhu omumfoni ewo sini so anase u TV isu IGP ne nimpanyinfo abomode abomo abaso ewo police dibre nimu ama omu dibra ewo soro na ye nimisise obia ye de dibre kese ebehye ne nsa no ne chese ye hia ade kese na efi ho nti ohye nipa dunsu inkran so se omonsonso momoden enese ya ma u dibra esu nti na oba abeye kokoti anante ho a wonye adwuma bia na emom ya ma u dibre no ya ma u dibra esu no chese wo so ye adwuma kese esenie wo ye ya ema ye de sa dibre no de ema wo no Adeshimama eha na Coastal TV donko kase bono yedi ebesi mayemfa seda ema National Petroleum Authority omo eni diesel gift shop ena oma so ya se ama ewie yetumedi kase boyi yede abro midin amejeswo eye AFIBA ESSIEN maminsanfa aseda ema me technical team eye Ben eni ej ena me programs manager Omar bin Abdallah omonso ka ho bi ena dwumadie ewie peye fefefe Coastal TV ye wonipa bebre e de mount bomaden na ma wafidie no enna heya